Welcome to the Moon Collective Sanctuary. I'm Dr. Lydia Luna, and I invite you to join me on a journey of self-discovery, healing, and transformation as we explore the depths of our inner and outer world to unlock our truest potential. Welcome, everybody, to the Moon Collective Sanctuary podcast. My name is Dr. Lydia Luna. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and founder of the Moon Collective Sanctuary. I'm so excited today to be joined by our very special Tanya Orellana, also known as Madre Jaguar. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to dive into our conversation, especially with everything that's going on. I know a big part of your work is to bring in ancestral wisdom and knowledge. You're also really about connecting to the land. And so what better timing than right now for those that are listening? We just had the LA fires. There's just a lot of emotions and feelings and questions happening right now during this time, right? And feeling really ungrounded. So I thought this was like so synchronistic to have you here to really talk about the importance of connecting to the land, connecting to ancestral wisdom and what it has to offer. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here and to have this conversation.
So as we get started, I'd love for the audience to get to know a little bit about you. What is it that you do and how everything led you here? I know your grandmother was a big influence and your work is deeply rooted in various traditions. So can you share about your work and how your traditions have shaped you?
I think of myself as a bridge between the worlds, whether it be between humans and plants and animals or spirits. How did I get into this? I've always been pretty intuitive since I was a kid. And however, I was not raised by people that were as equally intuitive or open. I was raised in a Catholic household. So one thing that was always constant was prayer and a connection to the divine. But through my maternal grandmother, that is how I started having a relationship and a connection to the plant kingdom. She never thought of herself as a psychic or an intuitive or a bruja or anything like that. But now that I think about her, she was highly sensitive. She was also a Scorpio like myself. And I remember that she would often wear like this little towel or a little piece of cloth over her head because she would say that she would get headaches if she didn't. And now that I do this work, I understand that she was, her crown chakra, her third eye were probably very open, and that's a lot of energy. Right? And intuitively, she knew to cover that area. Mm-hmm. But anyway, my grandma, Mama Carlota, is her name. She always loved plants. She always had plants around, and she was the first person to teach me that we can talk to plants, that they actually get very, very happy and they thrive when we sing to them. Yes. And that there's always a plantita, a plant remedy for anything from a stomach ache to a heartache. So I think of my Ma Carlota as one of my first teachers. That was one of the first, foundations for the work that I do.
I love it. I talk to my plants. I sing to them. I kiss them. I know that feeling. And then they give back. I feel their energy. I'm curious from what you said, what is a plant remedy for the heart? You said even for heartache?
For the heart, there's a few plant allies. Right now I'm thinking of rose. Rose is always one of my go-to plant allies. She teaches us to live with an open heart, but to have healthy boundaries. She's also used for cleansing and purification. And just in general, think about a rose. When you look at a rose, when you smell a rose, when you touch a rose, what does it evoke within you? Because that is one way in which we are communicating with plants through the senses and understanding how they can support us. Another great ally for the heart, especially for grieving hearts or broken hearts, magnolia, which in Nahuatl, which is an ancestral language in Mexico, magnolia is actually called yolosochi. Yolo, which means heart, and sochi, which means flower. So it's the flower of the heart.
I love that.
And same as with Rose, you can have this plant around, you can smell her, you can bathe with her. You can actually, there's an ancestral remedy for a broken heart, which you use magnolia petals, you use xochitl, which is poinsettia, and cacao flower.
I love it. Okay, I'm going to try it. Yes. So your grandma was a big influence, and your lineage. So tell me or tell us about what you do. What is your work?
I am a bridge.
And what does that mean for people that may not really understand?
So I am a clairvoyant, psychic oracle, which means I like to think of it as I'm tapped into a certain frequency that allows me to receive messages and hear nonverbal communication from animals, plants, and the spirit world. I am also a birth doula, which again, that to me is being a bridge between the worlds, between those that are joining us Earthside and supporting them. And I am also a healing practitioner, curandera. I've studied curanderismo, which is traditional healing in the Anahuac tradition, ancestral traditions of the Americas. And so a lot of the work that I do is helping people return to their hearts, helping people remember that we are all supported in this human experience, that we have support, we have allies, and that, we are beings that can heal themselves. A lot of the work that I do, or that I'm feeling guided to do right now, is also around empowering people and helping people remember that, this work that I do, I don't think it's special. We all have that ability to connect to the unseen world. And especially during these times, it's very important that we start remembering our connection to Earth, that we remember that we are nature herself, that we're not separate from nature, and to remember our role as humans, right? So a tree knows that it's a tree and it knows exactly what to do. A dog knows that it's a dog and it knows what to do as a dog. A rose knows that it's a rose and it knows what to do. And humans, I feel we are the only beings that are feeling lost or don't know what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
But, if we think of this planet as a beautiful garden, we are the gardeners. We are the ones that are meant to be planting seeds and supporting all of the natural processes of nature, which is ourselves.
What do you think is getting in the way? What has happened that we have forgotten?
I think it's been a lot of different things. So, I've studied under different teachers, and I feel like all of my teachers have shared like a piece of the puzzle. One of the things is electricity happened, and that helped shift our own rhythms and cycles, right? So before, we used to have the fire within our homes, and the fire was the fire that we used to cook. It was the fire that kept us warm at night. It was the fire that was our the light of the house, right? And so as a family, we were tending that fire, and instead of watching a show, we would share stories. We would talk about the things that were happening with us, and we were in direct relationship with fire, which is an element, right? And nowadays, if we think about it, we live within a culture where we are inundated with different information from many different sources, right? Before, we were working directly with the land. We were planting seeds. We were growing our own food. We had a relationship with the animals that we were eating. We knew where our food came from. And all of that has changed, mostly because things became industrialized. And, most people nowadays don't really know where their food comes from, or don't have a relationship with their food, right? And that also took the sacred element of these relationships, right? If I had a cow, and I was going to eat it, it was very different because I was the one that raised that cow and fed that cow and had a relationship with that cow. And then when it was a time to sacrifice that animal, it was done with respect, and we were using everything, right? All that animal could give us, we were using it. And there was no waste, and there was a lot more appreciation for that.
I'm even hearing more harmony, more community, and all of this too.
Yes, there was more reciprocity, with the land too. I feel like as modern humans, we are very used to just taking and taking and taking. And what can I get? What more can I get? And we forget that there has to be reciprocity in all of our relationships.
That's right. And even sacrifice sometimes.
Compromise too. There has to be a compromise. I often think about, when did we decide to pour concrete over nature? And who is that serving? And did we ask nature if that was something that would be beneficial for all of the beings that were inhabiting that space?
Yeah. It's like we want convenience, and it's coming at a cost. And we're not realizing it sometimes until we look back and we're like, oh, that happened. And yes, this is convenience. We have easy access to things. We have roads. There's efficiency, perceived efficiency, because maybe there was efficiency then. It was just a different type of efficiency. But it's coming at a cost, definitely. And I think we're all feeling it, like really feeling it now.
They call it progress, but is it really progress?
Right.
And,
it's not to say that we have to choose one thing over the other. I feel like we can still have technology and we have that convenience, but it has to be rooted in empathy for everything that is surrounding us, right? Not just for humans.
I love this idea, or this notion of, it doesn't have to be one or the other. It doesn't have to be black or white, all or nothing. You can have both. You can appreciate the technology and forward thinking and all of the amenities that come with this modern traditional world, but to not forget the connection to the land, the ancestral wisdom, what we know innately, not forgetting ourselves and our connection to earth. That is such a great point.
It's about balance. And this nugget of wisdom actually came from the fire. I sat with a fire. I am a fire tender and keeper. And one time I was invited to light a fire, and I sat with the fire, and what the fire said was that it's not about having to choose technology over nature or nature over technology, because in reality, technology came from nature, but that technology should be supporting the processes of nature in order to achieve that balance. And this is something that nature does on her own, right? So nature, we know when we observe nature, when we observe our planet, we realize that this is a self-healing organism.
Yes.
And I remember, I don't know, maybe like 7 years ago, I was meditating on this, and I had this thought of, one is that as humans, we are very destructive. And what would life be like if we were a little bit more mindful of how destructive we can be, but that we're also creative beings? We can create as much as we can destroy.
With our duality, we're both.
Right? And then the other is that nature knows what to do and how to take care of herself and how to heal herself, right? And us as humans, we're really just meant to be supporting that. So I was thinking about plastic. Now there is plastic everywhere. There is plastic within our own organisms, right?
Yes.
Everywhere. We can't escape it. And this is something that we humans created. And I had this idea of, I bet that nature will come up with a type of mushroom that eats plastic because nature knows what to do. And a couple of years ago, a mushroom has been discovered that consumes plastic.
Really?
And so sharing this right now, because stuff like this brings me hope, right? Because there's this understanding that as much as we are destroying things, or that there's destruction around us, because we live in the plane of duality too. So there's always going to be destruction, creation, darkness, and light, right? Mm-hmm. But that nature finds a way. love and life find a way.
Yes.
And so how do we step up to support that? Because it is in all of our benefits.
So what are some things people can do as we talk about them, remembering, connecting to Earth? Are there certain practices that help? Is it just being more aware? I imagine also making certain choices, but what would be your starting point or suggested starting point?
Start where you are. It's very easy. There's things happening all over the world, right? And sometimes we want to be able to help everything and everyone, but start where you are, right where you are. Get to know the land that you live on. Get to know who your neighbors are. And I don't mean just your human neighbors, but I also mean get to know what trees are growing around you, what plants are growing around you, what animals live around you, and introduce yourself to them. And just hold that intention of, I want to walk in a more conscious and balanced way. And, nature also wants that from us. And so nature is going to show up. And just like with any relationship, we have to cultivate that relationship. We have to every day, if you are feeling very drawn maybe to a specific plant or a bird that's been coming to visit you, every day take some time to cultivate that relationship. And you begin to understand that everything around us is communicating with us, right? Right now I'm being reminded, very important as well to have a balanced relationship with our own physical body, which is the vessel for our spirit to move through this plane. And so it's going to make it more difficult for me to have a conversation with a plant if I am not even willing to listen to my own body, right? Yes. So paying attention to very simple things such as, do I need to drink water right now? Do I need to rest? Do I need to go to the bathroom? Because many times we're living here, just in the mind, in our thoughts, and disengaged and disconnected from the physical body, which is our direct connection to all of nature.
Yes. So starting with oneself, strengthening our connection to ourselves, to our body, and that's going to help us then be open and even attuned to outside elements or energies. That's how we can differentiate even sometimes between us and something else, right? Is to know where we are, who we are, how we are, and feel a difference, a shift. Okay, so you describe yourself as somebody who walks between worlds. And so you've had visions, dreams, visitations, which I want to hear about, by the way. So tell me about that. But also, how do you help others walk between worlds and connect in that way?
So I walk between the worlds. And what that means to me, there's different layers, right? Like one is I'm the child of immigrants. I was raised in Mexico, but I was born in Los Angeles, California. So growing up, I never really felt like I belonged to one specific place. So there's that. And then the more, I guess, spiritual aspect of it is that I've always been very intuitive. As a child, it became overwhelming because I remember as a child going out to restaurants and feeling like I could hear everyone's conversations in the restaurant and didn't understand that not everyone's like that. And so I would throw tantrums because I didn't know I felt overwhelmed. And then when I try to explain that to the adults in my life, they were like, what? As a child, I always, I would cry because I wanted to go home. And I would tell my parents, I want to go home. I want to go back to my family. And they would be like, what are you talking about? You are home. Now I understand that there was a memory there of coming from a different place and just as a child feeling lost and confused and like, why am I here? Like, where is my home? Where is my people? So when I was about 7 years old, I remember that I consciously closed the doorway to my spirit guides and spirit world, and having visions and having dreams and having intuition, because it was just too much.
Yeah.
And as a child, I would try to explain to the adults what was happening, and for them it was like, oh, you're imagining it. These are your imaginary friends. It was a dream. To the point where I started feeling like, I feel like I'm crazy. And I remember I talked to my guides, who I perceived to be this group of people that were above, who were always watching me, who were always observing, and who I would always talk to. And one day I told them, you need to go away because I'm being told that you're not real, and this makes me very uncomfortable. And they honored my request, and to me it felt like that door was closed. And then fast forward to 19, I go away to college. I went to art school, and things started opening up back up. And this was a whole process, where now I understand that I needed to go through that process of closing the doors and learning how to open them back up again. Because that's what I do with people now, right? People that are highly sensitive, or people that want to develop their own gifts and abilities when it comes to intuition, psychic abilities, working with energy. I help them open that door. Mm-hmm. And I also help them understand that it has to be a slow process. Mm-hmm. Because as humans, we're very impatient. Yes. And we want things right away. But it's actually better for it to be a slow process. And I always say it's like a muscle. Yeah. The more that you're practicing, the more that you're tuning in, the stronger that muscle gets, and the more that things are going to open up for you.
Something that I learned through my own journey is that I was raised religious too. And so there was this conditioning or programming about like doing. In order to tap in, you have to do certain things. Like during one phase of my life, one of the religions I was in, we couldn't wear makeup. We had to dress a certain way. Couldn't cut our hair, color our hair. Like there was a lot of sacrifice. And I understand the concept of sacrificing in order to receive. So I'm not speaking like that's not a good thing, but it made me believe that I have to do certain things or be a certain way in order to receive or access, certain information or understandings or blessings. And I realize now through my work more recently that it's not about doing or like anything about me. It's actually just getting out of my way, about surrendering, which is the opposite of doing, and that's helped me to understand how to better access the southernness, and I think that's something important to remember, that yes, we should do, sometimes when I ask for something too, I understand, what are you going to sacrifice? Because it's a beautiful exchange to give in order to receive. But sometimes the message is just surrender. Don't just be still and stay open and then see what comes, So I think it's cool that you have, since a young age, understood and have learned to navigate. And so at some point you decided to open up, it sounds like. And how was that for you once you decided to open up?
I have to be honest that at the beginning it was scary because things were happening that made no logical sense. So for example, like I remember waking up one night because someone kept turning on my night lamp, which you physically had to like turn the knob for that to happen. And they did it several times for me to pay attention, right? But back then, for me, that was scary. Waking up in the middle of the night and the lights are turning on and off, and not understanding what's happening.
How old were you at this point when that stuff was happening?
17. Which, by the way, I recently learned that when we go through these stages of evolution, so for example, when we're transitioning from being an adolescent to an adult, those are energetic portals and opportunities for our gifts to bloom and develop. So that started happening, and I got a cat. Because at the same time that this was happening, again, we're never alone in our experience. We're always supported. I started receiving synchronicity about magic. And for some reason, like, this article popped up for me that said that cats were more spirits than animals and that they were actually guardians. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to get a cat.
But see how intuitively you were like drawn, you knew you were like stuff was just opening up for you.
Yeah.
This awareness, yeah.
And then now I think about how, like, that was the first energy. That was the first time that I was like, I'm going to set an energetic boundary and bring this being to be a guardian, right? And then what happened next is that I actually met my best friend who was interested in the spiritual world and energy and magic. And she was 18, I was 19. We were both going to college. We went to art school, and that's where we met. But then we would encourage each other in our exploration and our practices, and we began casting our first spells. And I remember that when we began casting our first spells, it was because we wanted to find community. We wanted to meet other people that were in the same frequency and that were into the same thing. And so, yeah, when I look back at my life, I feel like it's been a series of events that led me to where I am right now. But all of that has helped me to understand my students or people that I'm supporting and how everyone has their own process. And it's also really beautiful to witness people when they first come in. Many times we feel overwhelmed because we don't know what to do with our gifts. And sometimes I say, you know, your gifts might at first feel like a curse, but it's not. They're a blessing once you learn how to manage them, how to set better energetic boundaries, how not to absorb everything. And it can be very empowering. And I feel that, you know, it's part of our natural evolution because there is more than the physical world. There is more than what we can see and perceive with our five senses. Yes. And ancestrally, this was something that was common knowledge, right? And then colonization, industrial age, we disconnected from that wisdom. But that wisdom literally lives within our being, within our physical bodies. Yeah. This is ancestral memory, knowledge, and wisdom that can become reactivated.
What a beautiful calling that you've responded to be this person, this guide, this teacher for people that are trying to find their way and navigate this way of being. I'm curious, is there ever anybody that you're like, no, I can't work with you? This is something that's like, you know, is there a darker side to what you do?
I feel like with everything, there's always that duality. There's the light and there's the dark. I would say for people that are seeking out a mentor, be very discerning because unfortunately, you know, not everyone has your highest interests.
I love that you're bringing this up.
Some people, you know, especially me doing psychic work, I feel like for the longest time we've had a bad rap because, you know, people think of psychic readers as people that are lying or they're just trying to take your money. And some people do that, right? There are some scammers out there, which is why we have to use our discernment. But there are people who are legitimately doing this because we want to see a positive change in the world. Just be discerning. Not everything that shines is gold, right? Do your research. If you're feeling drawn to someone, get to know them, interview them, and then see if that person is the right fit for you. And, you know, if you're going to be opening these doorways, begin with the relationship that you have with your spirit guides, with your ancestors, with your spirit team, and they will help do work for you on the spiritual world that will manifest on the physical world.
So 2 questions from what you shared. How do people connect with their spirit guides, ancestors? And then you said discernment. So for people that may be newer to understanding this, how would you say one should start to practice discernment? What does that mean? How does that feel?
Feel it in your body. If you're feeling tightness or tension in your body, there's a reason why. If something feels expansive and open and joyful, that is also another sign for you. That's a way to navigate this. It's also what people do, not what they say. And the most important thing, like, a legit healer or psychic reader is never going to approach you and tell you, you need to do this. If someone does that, it's very likely that they're not legit and that they're after something else. So as people that work with energy and with the spirit world, we learn boundaries. And so I will never approach someone and be like, hey, I just received a message from your dead grandmother. We don't do that. And I share this with my students too. Our responsibility, our job is just to be a lighthouse. You shine your light, and the right people that need to work with you, that need to find you, they will find you. All we need to do is just show up.
That's beautiful. So, and then what about the connecting with the ancestors, with spirit guides, for somebody that's also maybe not as familiar? How would you recommend they do that?
So we all have what I like to call a spirit team, which is made up of our ancestors, our spirit guides, angelic beings, beings of light. And so the closest ones to us are our ancestors, right? Our ancestors are literally our family, whether we know who they are or not. They have an investment in our joy and well-being. When we work with ancestors, we always ask to work with the ones that are healed and well. Sometimes we call them bright ancestors, right?
This means that they have let go of their ego attachments, their whatever human hangups they had. They've gone through what I like to call the karmic washer.
I like that.
Where they release all of the, all of the hangups about being human, and then they take their rightful place as guides and guardians for the lineage.
And so just like a relationship with anybody, right? Plant, animal, person, we have to cultivate that relationship, right? It could be something as simple as creating space in your daily life to sit down and have a conversation with them, right? My family, we love to drink coffee in the morning. So one of my practices is when I prepare a cup of coffee for myself, I prepare a cup of coffee for my abuelos, my abuelas, and I just set it on their altar. Or if you don't have an altar, you can just sit down, set a cup of coffee for them, and just hold that intention of, I am creating space to cultivate and nourish my relationship with you. And you can even say, I don't know who you are, but I know that you know who I am, and I want to learn how to be in relationship with you. And then you start to pay attention to different things, right? Synchronicity, physical sensations, that inner voice or inner guidance, right? And they always show up, and they are here to support us. But as humans, we have free will, so they can't intervene unless we ask them. And also be very specific about what you're asking.
Yeah.
I've learned I always ask, and may it be for my highest good, because sometimes as a human, I think I need things or I want things, but they might not be for my highest good.
Yes.
And they might manifest, right? And so being very mindful too about what you're calling in, what you're asking for, and what you're asking for.
Yeah, get clear on what you want and then ask. Yeah. And talk about the altar, because I understand it's like what anchors a space. So can you share, what is an altar? What is it for you, and how is it helpful?
So I think of an altar as an energetic doorway through which energy is coming in and out. And it's a focus place for that energy to be coming in and out. When we work with ancestors in many traditions, it is common to have an altar for them, right? And on that altar, depending on your tradition, depending on where you're from, some people like to have photos of their ancestors. They like to have items that represent their ancestors. So for example, like I have my grandmother's ring, and you put it on your altar, and that represents the energy of your grandmother. In general, the way that I was taught to build altars and work with altars is we always have a representation of the elements, which help us create energetic boundaries, right? So we have a representation of the element of air, fire, water, and earth. And intention propels fruition, right? So if I'm building an altar for my ancestors, the the key is going to be that intention of I am creating this sacred space to honor my ancestors. And then you begin weaving your altar in a way that feels organic and good to you, right? Even if you've never built an altar before, everything is about intention. So always asking, may this be for the highest good. May this be a way for me to honor and connect to my ancestors. And I feel like even just thinking about, oh, I'm going to create an ancestral altar, you're letting them know that you want to be in communion with them, and they will start guiding you and telling you, we want flowers, or we want food, or we want coffee. And in terms of offerings on the altar, Spirit always likes things that are beautiful, colorful, that smell nice, that are very bright and pleasant to look at. And so I also think of building altars as part of my creative practice. I put a lot of my love and creativity into it. And so that, again, is very intuitive.
I always have different people in mind when I ask questions. And so I want to ask you a question for somebody that maybe comes from a religious background, as we talked about, right? Where having altars may be seen as bad, or what are you doing? Or you're idolizing, people that aren't God or Jesus or whatever. I'd love to hear more about how this is not worshiping something or someone, or is it? And maybe talking more about this other concept for those that want to, but then that have that in the back of their mind.
Make it make sense to you.
Yeah.
Right? So again, I was raised Catholic. I wanted to be a nun.
You did?
Yes.
Oh, I love it.
And
But my mom, my grandma, on my maternal side, they're very Catholic, and they pray the rosary. And so I learned to pray through them and with them. And, I think right now I'm thinking about my mother, who doesn't necessarily resonate with the practice of working with the ancestors. But she has a photo of my grandma, of her mom, on her altar, where she has Jesus and Virgin Mary, and she always lights a candle for her. And it's a way for her to remember her mother and to honor her mother. So I don't think that we're worshiping our ancestors at all. We are honoring them, because at least, the way that I've been taught, and from my perspective, is we honor them because they are the ones that paved the way for us to be here. We have these bodies thanks to them, and they live within our bodies.
Yeah. And in honoring, you're strengthening a connection. And then I'm hearing opening yourself up to receive wisdom or knowledge or something.
And, for someone that, I know that sometimes the stuff that I talk about can be very woo-woo, but, for someone that is maybe that has a more scientific mind, let's think about it in this way. So our physical bodies are made up of genetic information from all of the people that came before us. And now it has been proven that experiences that they went through get encoded into the DNA that they then pass on to us.
That's right.
And so, within our DNA, within our physical bodies, there is wisdom of both gifts and abilities that are part of our birthright by belonging to those lineages. And there's also trauma, right? And so when we start doing work with the ancestors, it's not just about revisiting the trauma. It's about understanding that there has been trauma within our lineages, and that trauma might be informing the way that we're living our current lives and the decisions that we're making, which just understanding that and tracking the energy can be so healing and so powerful, because we then realize, oh, I'm repeating the same pattern. I'm repeating the same story as my great-grandmother or my grandmother. And then we have the choice to change that story, to rewrite that story. While at the same time, we are connecting to the gifts, to the abilities, to the wisdom that is our birthright, right?
Yes.
So to give you an example of that, maybe I am in a place where I am thinking about starting my own business. It is very likely that somewhere in my lineage, there was a businessman or a businesswoman that was very successful, right? I can tap into that information and receive guidance. You know, whether you want to think about it as I'm tapping into my own DNA that has these codes of successful business person, or from a more spiritual perspective, I'm calling in the energy and the wisdom of my ancestor to help me create this business and to help me move forward.
And so that's a reminder that you're not alone, even when you're doing things, because there's all this wisdom right there with you.
We're never alone. We might feel alone in our experience, but we're never really alone.
Yeah.
Because we have our spirit team that is always walking with us, and they're just there. We just need to literally open the door and let them know, hey, I want to talk to you, or I want to receive wisdom from you. And then we have all of the other beings that are in symbiotic relationship with us, right? Our plants, our animals, everything, and other humans around us.
I love it because it's like bringing to light the value. There's value in these practices. For people that are newer to this or unfamiliar, sometimes it's like, well, what's the purpose? What's the point? But there's value in connecting to this otherness and how we can apply it to our daily lives. It's so beautiful. Yeah.
And what's the value? At least for me on a personal level, it helps me navigate this human experience. It helps me make sense of what doesn't make sense. And then it also helps me be okay with not knowing.
So you've talked about joy and harmony being our birthright and a superpower. So share more about how people can begin to reclaim these truths in a world that often feels disconnected.
I believe love is our superpower. I believe love is what makes everything. Some people call it God, goddess, source, spirit, creator, universe. I like to call them love. And it's this energy that everything is made up of, including ourselves. And if we lived in a more balanced reality, shouldn't we feel joyful? And even this question makes me think about, like, why aren't we joyful? Why aren't we connecting to our joy more? It should be at the forefront of everything that we do, right? How I'm showing up in the world should bring me joy. Where I'm putting my energy and my time into should bring me joy. And if it's not bringing me joy, am I being honest about the life that I'm living and what I'm doing and how I'm showing up?
Right.
So I feel joy is also a guidance mechanism, right? And it brings expansiveness and evolution and new possibilities. And so right now my question is, how is everyone connecting to their joy? What brings you joy? How are you feeding that joy?
I feel as we get older, it takes more intention to live in joy because we have so much responsibility, or we're doing so much that we lose touch with that part of us. So for me, it's an intention. And sometimes I do wonder, like, what can I do that would bring me joy? It's usually more in a creative aspect for me, but it has to be intentional. Like we really have to make it like part of our priorities.
Because we're not living in balance, right? And, and it's not something specific to any one person. I feel like this is more of a cultural symptom.
Yes.
Where we have been raised within a culture that values the constant doing, right? We live in capitalism. Everyone should be always doing something, right? You have to be producing. And that is completely out of balance. And again, if you look at nature, you see that nature has her seasons and her cycles. And because we are nature, we also have our seasons and our cycles. And so have you taken time to rest, right? Or am I feeling unhappy because I'm feeling anxious because I'm not doing enough? And what enough for who? What does that mean?
So as we're talking about balance, then the recent fires are coming to mind because I feel like that's a symptom of imbalance between humans and the land. So is there anything that you want to dive into in terms of this topic? I know you recently took a trip as well, and there was some connection even there for you. So let's talk about that.
Give land back.
Yeah.
And
Mic drop. That's it. Just
give land back.
Yeah.
And what that means is not that someone's going to come and take your house away. That is not what that means. It means we're going to uplift the original people and stewards of the land who know how to take care of the land better than we do, right?
And we're also going to make an effort to understand how we can show up for the land. There are fires burning everywhere in the world right now. And fire is a great teacher. So if you take anything from what I'm sharing here today, don't be mad at the fire. Because the fire is a teacher that is illuminating something. Anytime there is a fire, it calls people to gather in community, right? And I'm going to weave this back to the beginning of, we used to have the fire in our homes. We were tending to that fire. We were feeding that fire. We were in relationship with that fire. We were listening to that fire. And that fire was listening to us.
That's right.
And so what we see right now with all of the fires burning is that we are out of balance. You know, we have also forgotten to be in right relationship with water. There's not enough water.
That's right.
You know, there hasn't been enough rain in a lot of different territories. And that is because we're cutting trees. We're pouring concrete over nature.
Yeah.
Anytime you cut trees and pour concrete somewhere, that piece of land will immediately become hotter and hotter and hotter. Right? I had the privilege of living in many different countries, in many different places, and have witnessed firsthand that there's a water problem everywhere. And here in the United States, we are very spoiled and very privileged. We don't even have to think about where water comes from. We just open the faucet and there it is. Right? While in other places, you even wash dishes in a different way, right? I was just in Guatemala with staying at my teacher's home, and they have a whole system to wash dishes and take showers and wash their clothes because they only have water between certain times of the day.
Interesting.
And so, you know, that might seem like a very far away reality that is happening in another country. We're all sharing the same planet. And if it's happening over there, it's going to be happening here soon. And so very important right now to have consciousness around the elements, consciousness around water, thinking of water as a mother because she nourishes life. You know, without water, we can't live. Thinking of fire as a teacher and someone that, an element that illuminates things, right? Thinking about the air, thinking about the earth, thinking about all of these elements that we're coexisting with and that, you know, they are also within our bodies. We're mostly water. We have our internal fire, right? Yeah. We couldn't be alive if we weren't breathing. And right now, something that's been giving me a lot of grief is understanding that after these fires, our water is toxic. The air we're breathing is toxic. You know, whoever was growing food like that, there's particles of metals and things everywhere. And now, to me, you know, it makes me very sad, but it also gives me hope that
maybe this is what needed to happen so that we can turn it around.
And it's unfortunate, and I wish that it didn't have to get to that point, and I hope that it doesn't have to continue getting to that point. But we have to change our ways now, like we needed to change our ways yesterday. And, you know, with this, I'm also thinking and feeling and tuning into how everyone has something that they can contribute, right? Everyone has a very specific calling about how to show up in the world at this time, right? Don't let it just be an idea floating around in the ether, but actually ground that idea and take the action that you're feeling inspired to take.
Yes, yes. We all have a responsibility. We're all part of this oneness. Well, is there anything else that you want to share before we conclude today? I feel like there's been so much rich discussion.
Don't lose hope and don't give in to despair. I know that things are always happening. It has felt like that for the past few years, like one thing after another, one thing after another. But what if we change our perspective and instead of thinking, what is happening is so bad and horrible and it's making me feel hopeless and making me go into despair, what if we started thinking about, this is happening for our highest good and it's an invitation for change. It's an invitation for evolution. And, as long as there is breath in our lungs, as long as we're still here. Lately everyone's like, how are you? And it's such an uncomfortable question, but what I keep saying is, I'm here. I'm still here. And as long as we are here, as long as there is breath in our bodies, there is hope.
I think that's profound, and I totally agree. And I needed to hear that today. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Please take care of yourselves. Nourish yourself. Resource yourself. Drink your water. And then pay attention to how you're feeling inspired to move through the world at this moment. And sometimes that movement is stillness.
So how can people find you? Please share, your information for those that are interested in connecting with you.
So for those that are interested in connecting with me, I offer pláticas, which are heart-to-heart talks. I also offer tarot readings, Akashic Records readings, and healing sessions. And you can find me through my website, immadre.com, or you can email me, hola, HOLA, at immadre.com. Or I'm on Instagram, which is a platform that I'm the most active in. And my handle there is madre.jaguar.
And we've done an event together at the Moon Collective Sanctuary, and I'm sure we're going to have something else coming up in the near future.
I would love to. Maybe we can go out to nature.
Yes, yes, exactly. Oh, well, thank you so much again for taking the time. Really appreciate everything you said. I think this is really helpful for our community, especially during these times. So thank you, and thank you everybody for listening today. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care. Bye. Thank you for joining me on the Moon Collective Sanctuary. Remember, your journey to a more fulfilling and empowered life continues beyond this episode. Until next time, may you remember who you are and stay open to embrace all that life has to offer. Ready to dive deeper into your journey of self-discovery? Join us for a transformative retreat at the Moon Collective Sanctuary. Visit mooncollectivesanctuary.com to learn more and book your spot.